Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Board of Trade podcast, brought to you by the Brampton Board of Trade and our fantastic sponsors, the Brampton Honey Badgers, who just wrapped up their home portion of their most recent season. Some ups and downs in terms of the final scores, but a really, really great season from the perspective of fan engagement and some really fun games. So thank you to the Honey Badgers for your support for this, but thank you also for providing so much great entertainment and a sense of community for your fans this season as well. Vijay, I'm Jaipaul, and I'm here with I'm
Vijay.
Partner Vijay.
Yeah.
And so Vijay, we are at episode 12 of this project.
Yes.
We originally committed to internally, you, myself, and Josh, who you folks don't see on the camera, but who is diligently behind the scenes making these things happen, to doing 10 of these.
Yes.
And to figure out, A, if we could even pull it off.
Yeah.
And B, if it was worth us doing this work. And C, I guess, if anyone was listening.
Yeah.
And because of various circumstances, vacations, illnesses, and so forth, we weren't together for episode 10.
That's right.
We had a couple of great guest episodes, which were really fun. I think we need to bring on some more guests.
Totally.
But what I would have asked you if we were both here for episode 10 is we made it to our milestone.
Yeah.
And what do we think? What did we learn? Can we do this? Should we be doing this? Are people listening? And how do you feel about us doing a podcast?
You know, this is the first podcast that I've been a part of. I mean, I've been a guest on podcasts, but this is the first one that I've committed to sort of on an ongoing basis. Yeah. And at first, I was thinking maybe the era of podcasts are behind us. Even though I do listen to podcasts, maybe long form content is just, that we had reached peak podcast. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, and I wasn't sure if anyone was listening until we went out into the world and people would come up to us and say, "I really love this episode. I loved when you talked about this." We got emails saying, love the Board of Trade name." And so it's a small but growing listenership, and I think it's the listenership is actually quite engaged. Yeah. I would say so. I'm really happy with what we're building here, and I think, especially considering the dearth of media voices in this community, not to overstate, neither of us are Walter Cronkite. I mean, we're not the news, but I think this sort of commentary on Brampton affairs is very much needed. Yeah.
I think so too. I think, and I appreciate you pointing that out. I think it's important that we remind ourselves and acknowledge to anyone who's listening to this, we do not consider ourselves journalists here. We're not, quite frankly, not holding ourselves to that standard. Truth matters, but I think it's important we acknowledge our limitations, and also that we are creating commentary here more than we are, breaking the news for a whole number of reasons, including logistics. We just can't do this daily.
Totally.
One of the things I've been thinking about a lot recently, and it's not a novel thought to me. It was actually inspired by another podcast I was listening to, where an author was talking about, in this case, a fiction author, was talking about telling the stories of her people and what happens when the stories of a people aren't told, and what happens when a group of people don't get to see themselves being portrayed in a light that's at all aspirational. And in this particular case, it was Barbara Kingsolver. She's talking about people in the South in the U.S. But the point she was making is that when people don't have the opportunity to have their stories told, then they become the victims or the victims of how other people tell those stories.
That's right.
And in her case, she's an author talking about the Deep South and all the ways the Deep South is portrayed in negative ways or caricatured and so forth in the pop culture, and sort of her desire to change that narrative. And we kind of understand that intuitively. I mean, it's among the reasons we talk about how representation matters and so forth. And in listening to that podcast, all I was doing the whole time was nodding along.
Yes.
Because I felt like, oh my gosh, this is us.
Yeah.
Right? Because we don't have our media, because no one here tells our stories consistently and loudly, we have our stories being told by people like SixBuzz and other media outlets, CP24, where they're looking for quick sound bites, they're looking for the most salacious stories, they're looking for the things that get clicks, and as a result, the story that gets told about Brampton is so far from the story of what Brampton actually is.
Yeah.
And for me, it just doubled down the reason why doing something like this is important to me.
Totally.
Someone needs to tell our story.
Yeah.
And I think the opportunity for us, as we continue the podcast, because I think we're at 12, so we clearly passed the 10 mark.
Yeah.
And I think, we're committed to doing more of these. And we had a great talk as a team yesterday about how we might be able to do more to expand the reach of the podcast.
Yeah.
I think for me, a big driver of it going forward is going to be, how do we not just comment on what's happening in Brampton, but amplify the stories of Brampton. And I think, us bringing on, we saw between Michael Victor's, having Sonia on, having Jonathan English on, that, having guests on is something we can do, bring in other perspectives. I think it's something you and I should really figure out how we do more of. Is tell these Brampton stories and bring in other people to really expand the perspective. But owning our story feels like the purpose of the podcast to me right now.
It goes back to something that you shared in a previous episode, that we are in the storytelling business. And I truly believe that. And it's interesting because I think I am very grateful that I'm constantly inspired by the community around me, the people I meet, the Policy and Government Relations Committee. I'm very grateful for that. But I have contemporaries of mine who are in Brampton who just see it as a sleeper suburb, and they are not inspired, and they feel they need to leave the community to get this inspiration. I'm not trying to say that Brampton is perfect, but I think if we can share with sort of the general population some of the inspiration that we experience on a daily basis, I think that would do that'd be a great benefit to the civic culture of the city as well.
Absolutely. I think it contributes in so many ways, even beyond that.
Yeah.
But that civic culture piece, I think, is the work of a board of trade and what it can be. And I think that's the most basic starting point. But I hope and aspire to do more than that if we do this well and we bring on the right types of stories over time. Hopefully that becomes something that inspires people beyond just the civic culture. And in ways that are creative or in ways that are really additive to where this city is going, bringing people here and making them feel proud about being part of Brampton. Hey there, Jaipaul again, and just wanted to thank one more time the Brampton Honey Badgers for your ongoing support of the Never Board of Trade podcast. And if you're listening or watching and haven't had an opportunity yet to support the Honey Badgers, I highly recommend you do so. They put together a fantastic product, lots of fun. The game activations are amazing. The energy in the arena is fantastic. This season's been a little bit up and down from a results perspective, but as someone who's gone to a lot of the home games, it's been a really, really fun time. Now, their home season is done, but there are 2 games left in the calendar for the Honey Badgers, one against Winnipeg and one against Saskatchewan at the time of that you'd be listening to this, at the time of the release of this podcast. And all things going well, there's still a shot that they may make the playoffs this year. And if that happens, then hopefully some more home games as part of their playoff push will occur. So all good wishes to the Honey Badgers, hoping that they can catch Montreal and get into the playoffs, and maybe we get a couple bonus home games out of this amazing season. But please make sure you're supporting the Badgers. I know season early buying opportunities for next year's season's tickets with some great deals are already out there, and I encourage you to go to their website and see what you can do to support this amazing team that's doing so much to support the Brampton Board of Trade and our community. Thanks so much.
I think we do have a prompt maybe later that we'll get to about why we are advocating for Brampton. But this is a good start, I think. Let's acknowledge that we are recording this a week early.
That's right.
July 31st. That's when we're recording this, and we'll be speaking about some topical issues that are very relevant today, but that might radically change by next week when you're listening to this. So, with that caveat, there are
we're not in the prophesizing business, so
exactly.
we apologize now if the next 10 minutes are irrelevant because the whole world has changed in the meantime.
Yes. With that, do you have an issue for us to chat about?
Oh, there's lots of issues, but I think there's a couple in particular that I think have gotten us a little bit excited right now.
Okay.
I think an interesting one, because I'd love to hear your perspective on it, because I think it really runs counter, I think, to how people see our province operating in the current state, has been the decision that came about yesterday, where the Supreme Court of Ontario overruled the province in terms of their desire to remove bike lanes, and cited some very specific and very interesting reasons for why they did so.
Yeah.
And I, this is really, I'd love you to talk about it because I think you do a better job of digging in and explaining these things to our listeners. But to me, this is a fascinating story.
It is.
At a time that I think there was a real perception that the province has carte blanche to do what they want to do, and that our current government, not just post this most recent election, but for their entire the last term as well, really acted with some impunity when it came to their decisions. For the first time, seems like they may have hit a wall in terms of what it is that the premier doesn't always get his way. So let's talk a little bit about what's your perspective.
Let's talk about it. I think the way you framed it is the right way to frame it. And actually, it's very interesting because I think we're very used to seeing, more so than the prime minister of this country, we're used to seeing our premier kind of act as a supreme leader of the province in a way. And we see that acutely because we are ensnared in all of these municipal affairs issues, and municipalities are creatures of the province. And we've seen time and time again in Brampton and Peel region, in the Greater Toronto area, the provincial government unilaterally sort of veto the local decision making, and I think the one of the most illustrative examples is this bike lane issue. Several months ago, Premier Ford, Minister Sarkaria introduced a law within which they sought to remove about 19 kilometers of bike lane in downtown Toronto on Bloor Street, on University Avenue, and on Yonge Street. They cited that these bike lanes are taking up potential vehicle lanes. They are
adding to the congestion of the city, I think, was the big reason they cited.
Yes, exactly. And many advocacy groups, among them Cycle Toronto, they pointed to a few things. Number one, there isn't enough evidence to suggest that removing these bike lanes will alleviate congestion in any meaningful way. We talk about it all the time. Induced demand. You add more lanes, you just get more traffic.
Cars.
And then secondly, that removing bike lanes will actually just put cyclists at risk. Especially protected bike lanes. So with this, several months later, actually just this week, the Ontario Superior Court ruled in favor of Cycle Toronto and others, agreeing with them about their critiques around congestion and around the risk to life. They deemed this legislation unconstitutional, and we're not used to seeing the premier being vetoed like this. And it's interesting because the I guess legal principle that was applied was the principle of fundamental justice.
And that's why I found this fascinating. This was not held up because it felt that, my anticipation was that this was going to be argued on the grounds of regulatory and a legislative change. Was this done in the appropriate manner consultatively? Was it done in the appropriate manner in terms of a data? Like, to your point, there's a lot of objective information out there that would push against what the province was doing. And I thought that was the merits on which this was going to be adjudicated. But to have it come back as a human rights issue, I thought was fascinating. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just...
No.
This was the part that really blew me away, that they cited this as being the reason that people's safety trumped everything else in this case.
And in particular, Section 7 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which I don't have the exact wording, but guarantees life, security of the person, et cetera, et cetera. I know you're an avid cyclist. Our personal opinions are I think, pretty apparent. I'm in favor of bike lanes. We've talked about it ad nauseum. That being said, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, I've seen some legal experts who are themselves avid cyclists kind of weigh in on the issue in a pretty interesting way. And what they say is that they view the decision as a perfectly legitimate decision, but a bit of an expansion of the principles of fundamental justice. And this idea that, where is the line between, safeguarding our rights, Section 7, or just interfering in a policy decision? Right? That a democratically elected legislature has every right to adjudicate on, right? The example I saw, and I forget the name, but I saw it on LinkedIn, and I thought it was interesting. And it's a bit of a wonky example, but let's say the NDP rose to power, they banned peanut butter. Because some folks are allergic to peanut butter, peanuts and peanut allergies, whatnot. Let's say the Liberal Party rebranded into the pro-peanut butter party, and they came into power and they said, actually, we're going to reintroduce peanut butter, right?
I mean, Bonnie Crombie needs anything at this point, right?
There you go. You said it.
They may be desperate enough. They may be desperate enough.
Now, on the basis of Section 7 and the principles of fundamental justice, could you make the argument that because there's a contingent of the population that has peanut allergies and it is a threat to their life if they are around peanuts or consume peanuts in any way, could you make the argument that reintroducing peanut butter is now a contravention of Section 7?
Right.
And that is kind of like, it's not a perfect example.
No, I hear what you're saying. And no analogy is a perfect analogy, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. So I thought that was very interesting, and I've been thinking about that a lot. Even though I personally am, I think it's ridiculous to be ripping up bike lanes, and I think this is a municipal issue, but I have been thinking about this from a legal perspective.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate that, because what you don't want to have is the creep that comes along with this, because to your point, then every decision that follows, you're starting to set precedent, and you start to set potentially increasingly tenuous precedent, which can result in an inappropriate application of the principle. So I hear what you're saying, and I may be biased because, as you pointed out, I am a cyclist and I am pro bike lanes, and I am really excited to see that the city of Brampton for one is interested in putting in more bike lanes in particular communities in order to facilitate more active transportation. So all my biases out there, I hear what you're saying, but I think part of that measure has to be, and this is why things have to be this is what the courts are there for that interpretation. And so I think if you want to have a black and white reading of this, I see the peanut butter analogy. It's a good one, actually. But when you put it through the context of the interpretation of this, what is the greater public good? And what ultimately are you facilitating that's in the overall interest of society? In this particular case, when we talk about all the rationale behind why bike lanes are better for movement and within the city, what they do, why they're necessary from a socioeconomic perspective. I think there are bigger principles here that say we need to maintain that we need cyclists have rights, cyclists need to be protected, and we can't just legislate away cyclists. No. They're going to exist. They are a reality, and we have to protect those individuals because we have to give people the opportunity to commute safely through the city.
That's right.
And so I hear it, but I'm okay with this interpretation.
No, me too.
Because we don't have a choice when it comes to cyclists, and we have no other ways to protect them. With peanut butter, you have the choice not to purchase peanut butter. There's a lot of individual autonomy that can still safeguard the members of your family. And we rely on institutions like schools to say we're going to ban certain products from coming in there to protect those who are vulnerable. We don't have those same options with cyclists. People have to get to work. They have to get around the city.
Fair enough.
And there's no other way to do so. And the arguments that the province has held up, I think you could have gotten a similar conclusion based on the merits that were much more objective. But I'm perfectly comfortable with the interpretation being a human rights one because I think it makes sense in this particular case.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think just from a sort of aspirational standpoint, when we think about all of the public transit infrastructure that we want to be introducing into Brampton, we cannot conceivably build that without last mile supports like bike lanes, micromobility, streetscaping, all of that. That is just, they go hand in hand. And I know folks are upset when they see on Vauden there's a bike lane, nobody's using it, and then they pass Ken Willens or whatever, and there's no bike lane anymore. And I get that. The piecemeal implementation is maddening to me as well. But bike lanes make more sense the more bike lanes exist. Right? It's a system.
No, problem. And this is always the challenge with things like these public infrastructure projects. And bike lanes, I think, are probably the best example, at least come to mind. That the half measure solution is actually an argument for not doing it at all. Because to your point, that's where the half measure only increases driver frustration because you still have cyclists in vulnerable situations.
That's right.
It still frustrates the cyclists because they're still in vulnerable situations.
That's right.
And all you see is the taxpayer investment without the real conversion. Because the reality is that when we only have the half measure, I'm only speaking in the context of cycling here, when you only have the half measure, the overall increase in the number of people who are going to cycle is only going to be incremental. It's going to be people like me who are going to cycle anyway and who are comfortable cycling in traffic, or just like, well, now it's nice to have a few blocks where I'm safe. But the majority of individuals who would cycle but can't because safety is a concern, because they're young and their parents don't feel comfortable in being in that situation, because being near traffic is traumatizing or whatever the case may be. A half-measure solution will never get them to cycle.
Yeah.
So it'll look like, well, we've invested all this money in cycling infrastructure and not enough additional people are cycling. Well, it's because when you don't have a full network that's connected, then you still have spots where people are going to be vulnerable. If you don't have protected bike lanes and all you have is paint on the ground, well, paint doesn't stop anything.
No.
So you still have people who are not going to cycle.
Totally.
If you want, so this is one of those things that's the irony is to prove the proof of concept is you have to have the full implementation.
Yes.
And if you're not going to do that, you're actually just feeding those people who are the detractors who are going to say, see, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't work because we didn't do it right.
Totally.
And that's a really difficult conversation to have.
Yeah.
Because it really requires, I think, a commitment to doing something that we're not always good at doing here. And I don't mean just in Brampton, I mean as Canadians, which is you have to look at proof of concept in other places now.
Totally.
And we always fall to this, well, I want the built in Brampton, the built in Canada solution. There's a lot, and whether you talk about bike lanes or LRTs, there's lots of proofs of examples of how these work and change communities. But then you have to be comfortable looking at data that's coming from a place like in Europe or Asia or someplace else that's done it. And then once you go there, it's really easy to say, well, that works for them. We're unique and special snowflakes, and it's not going to work here.
No, absolutely.
You have to have this willingness to say, we're going to look at data in an objective way from other jurisdictions and understand how and interpret that and make it work in our community. And that is something that I feel like decision makers aren't always ready to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if anyone's interested more in this topic, I did a podcast with Jonathan English. We talk about comparisons between Canada and Europe. So to wrap up this segment, the provincial government did state that they are looking to appeal.
Yeah.
We'll see. Does this escalate to the point of the Supreme Court of Canada? That remains to be seen, but we'll be watching this issue.
It's really exciting. I think just the fact that we've even gotten to this point, not because I like seeing the provincial government frustrated, although that's an interesting thing just to see because we haven't seen it much. But to see that there are lines in the sand, and if it does go up to the Supreme Court of Canada, I'm really curious to see, because what I don't have a good perspective on is how this issue is being seen in other parts of the country. But when we look at Quebec, for instance, and the cycle networks that exist in places like Montreal, there's proofs of concept in Canada where this has been very, very successful. And so if this gets appealed up to a national body, I'm wondering if the precedents start to really work against the province of Ontario at that point in time.
Oh yeah. So speaking of local issues, there is some controversy around a member of ours, Regeneration Outreach in the downtown. There was a CBC News story that was released just a few days ago. Do you mind summarizing what's going on there?
Sure. I mean, I think at a high level, this is not an issue that is just happened in the last few days. It's come to a head in the last few days. And so Regeneration is a non-for-profit that operates in the downtown of Brampton that provides services to those who are experiencing homelessness, fundamentally, and a number of the wraparound services that come along with that. So they fundamentally are in the business of providing food to those who are experiencing homelessness or experiencing food insecurity. And they are located in the downtown of Brampton. And so as a result, a number of the individuals who are experiencing those, who need access to regeneration services, come into the downtown of Brampton, and because Regeneration, due to funding constraints, they don't offer shelter services. They don't operate extended hours. A number of those individuals will come in to access breakfast or lunch food programs and things of that nature. But as a result, at the end of the day, have no place to go. And so you have in the downtown of Brampton a concentration of individuals, as you do in many downtowns. I don't think this is unique to Brampton. It just so happens that we have a critical mass of these individuals because of Regeneration's presence at the corner of Church and Main there. But you have a large number of individuals who are experiencing homelessness, who are experiencing food insecurity, who are now in the downtown of Brampton and are just this is where they need to be in order to have access to those services ongoing. They don't have the means financially to transit across the city. They have no other place to go in many cases outside of the downtown of Brampton. So of course they're going to be close to the resources that are there to help them.
Totally.
Parallel to this, we've had a number of issues that residents have been experiencing that have come along with being in a downtown and being in a downtown where there are people who are experiencing that vulnerability. And that's things with petty crime. It's been things with encampments along the Etobicoke Creek Trail and so forth. And this has been difficult for the city to manage because, unfortunately, along with that have come legitimate safety and security issues at times as well. I'm not pretending that this has been a rosy situation. This has been difficult. But what's happened here is that the city has been facing, the council has been facing a lot of pressure from the residents to do something about this. There's an impact to security. There's a perception of safety. There's an impact to the value of those homes and so forth that have made people feel uncomfortable with the presence of regeneration. Put a lot of pressure on the city to help resolve this issue, and the city has tried to do so. And I understand there's been conversation. Again, this has been an ongoing issue for some time. But what seems to have happened in the last few days is that there's been an escalation where the city has sort of put their foot down and said, we need a resolution to this issue, and they're looking to regeneration to basically increase the level of security, to put in place the resources to better manage these individuals in the downtown away from the residents, or face financial penalties, quite frankly, that regeneration cannot afford to pay, which would result in regeneration, quite frankly, having to potentially relocate or reconsider their capacity to serve in this community. So this is kind of where we're at as a community right now. And it's a really unfortunate position to find ourselves in, because the reality is that this issue is symbolic, I think, of a much larger issue here that we're not talking about enough. We've tried to shine some light on this, not just through our day-to-day advocacy, but through the events we've had, including our State of the Region event, including our Brampton in Motion event. The lack of affordability in this community in general, but more significantly, the chronic underfunding for social services to Peel Region and the City of Brampton from other levels of government have resulted in a couple of things, but most significantly being organizations like Regeneration not having the resources they need to serve the community. At a time, quite frankly, due to economic factors and tariffs, that the need for these services are continuing to increase. So we're at this really difficult position now where the city is trying to represent the needs of the residents. Regeneration is representing the needs of these particular individuals. And there isn't a clear solution on how to move forward, because really the answer is not to push regeneration out, but to give regeneration the resources it needs to provide the services that these individuals require at a time that more and more people need these services. If we make
Explain that. More and more folks need these services. What are the circumstances that are leading?
Well, I think what we're seeing is, and it's early stages, but we know it's going to increase, is when we talk to our so one of the things that we're really privileged here at the Board of Trade, I think, is we represent businesses in Brampton, and the majority of our membership are businesses. But there are also a number of our members are community partners. And it thrills me when that happens. So we've got everyone from Wellspring to Revive to Big Brothers Big Sisters to Regen, Save a Food Bank. A lot of folks who are in the business of helping people in our community find their home. Roots Community Services within the Brampton Board of Trade. And so we have the opportunity to really hear firsthand the types of things they're going through. And in the same way that we talk to businesses about what they're going through. And one of the things we're seeing, and again, Brampton is not unique in this particular case, is the increasing number of individuals who are working poor. And because the cost of living is increasing ever more, but even more so now, the pressures that we're seeing with tariffs, with the cost of goods starting to increase, cost of groceries have gone up. We all, whether you rent or own, know the cost of accommodation is always increasing. But we're also seeing, and I talked about one of these in one of these the on-board videos that we did last week. Employers, even those who are being resolute and working to keep their staffs employed during these tariff times when they're experiencing increasing costs and reduced margins, are doing things like cutting back on overtime, cutting back on bonuses, reducing shifts on which again is putting pressure on people's wallets. So what we're seeing is, and is not necessarily the big spike in unemployment that one might anticipate with tariffs, although I certainly believe that's coming. I think most economists will tell you that's coming this fall. But what we are seeing already are folks who are experiencing, I have less in my wallet, everything else costs more, I need support. And that means more people going to resources like food banks in particular to get access to resources. And when those so we're seeing increasing pressure, and that pressure I anticipate is going to continue to increase at a time that the funding has not risen to support these organizations. So at a time that we are needing these services even more, And we anticipate in the coming year, even that the demand, to continue to rise. We need to be working with these organizations to enhance their capacity to serve, not trying to push them into corners where they're becoming even more challenged to deliver the services they have with the very limited resources they have available to them now.
That's the perspective that I'm really sad is not sort of being discussed enough, because I think if regeneration, if regen were to disappear from the community, it's not like these individuals, those experiencing homelessness,
they're not just going to go.
Yeah. And I guess my hope is that we get to a civic ethic, let's say, that acknowledges sort of root cause in this case, which is the fact that we are in circumstances that are creating more precarious employment, that folks are at risk of falling by the wayside and sort of being at the margins of society, and that we need to embolden civil society to be able to provide all of those wraparound supports that you talk about. Metamorphosis, our friends there have last year commissioned a report that demonstrates that Peel Region's being underfunded by a shortfall of nearly $1 billion. And I think part of the conversation that I think is being missed is, yes, this I can understand from the resident perspective, this is very frustrating. But what we need in response is are more robust institutions that can help these individuals, and we can sort of uplift the entire community. Because if we are seeing more and more folks who are using, like, Save a Food Bank as an example, who are employed, but they're working poor, as you say, our society is regressing.
Yeah.
Right? We're not progressing, and that should be a concern to every resident in Brampton.
Well, in so many ways, right? Like, I'm not naive about this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not suggesting that every person here is it's a simple solution.
No.
There are a number of individuals, that experience some of the other factors that go along that contribute to or are a byproduct of being homeless or having food insecurity, things like mental health and addiction and so forth.
Yes.
These are not simple answers just to say it's just about having more food available and everything goes away.
No.
So yes, to everything you're saying, it's complex, and I respect the fact that it's complex. It's not a reason to not do it.
No.
And it's not, and all the more reason to say, and then we're just going to push these folks out of the community or have them relocate to someplace else.
No.
Is going to solve this. These individuals still need access to all these other resources, services, and so forth.
Totally.
So whatever solution we're going to have to broker, it's going to have to be a comprehensive one.
Yeah.
So why are we pushing a service out of a community and relocate it? No matter what you do, we're going to have the same commitment to the solution. We may as well work where they are right now.
Yeah.
And help build that out. I understand the perspective. You live in the downtown Brampton. For 15 years, I lived in the downtown Brampton. I know this neighborhood well. And I owned the medical clinic that was across the street from Regeneration. And at one point rented space in the same place Regeneration operates out of. I'm familiar with what they do. It's not easy.
No.
But it's the right thing to do, is to support the members of our community that are vulnerable. And I think when we don't do that well, I think that speaks tremendously to where we are as a society. To your point about regression, it does not speak well to us, I think, when we say we can't look after those in our community who are vulnerable. I'm sympathetic to those who are residents here, but let's find solutions that create safety, create awareness, and quite frankly, one partner who we haven't talked about here are those in the healthcare sector, and those in the community safety sector, and understand where they fit into the solutioning as well. So I don't want to jump to conclusions just yet. We have a lot of talking and learning to do here.
Absolutely.
But right now, this feels like a really difficult situation that requires some real thoughtfulness on how to resolve, because this community, in order to grow in the way we need to, needs a vibrant downtown and needs a functioning downtown. And we've seen the city's commitment to doing so. Recently, they've announced there's some teardowns that are happening on Main Street to facilitate some of the new development coming in. They've recently announced that they're going to do the teardown of the parking garage and some of the city structures that are on George Street to start the work on the Center for Innovation. So clearly, having a functional downtown is critical. The city has made it a clear priority. They've made the investments at the federal and provincial level to support that. But part of that functioning downtown means that we have to have a downtown that works for everybody, not just those of us who have the capacity to own property in that downtown.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay,
and then the other thing I think that we want to talk about. So there's like those are the two things.
Yeah.
The first of which I think is going to play out over the next couple of months.
Yeah.
So very relevant.
Yes.
The second of one is going to play out over the next few weeks.
Yes.
So hopefully still relevant when people listen to this. The third one may change in the next like 24 hours.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting to talk about nonetheless.
Yes.
And that's the Canadian government's recent announcement as of yesterday.
Yes.
That they're interested in as part of putting diplomatic pressure on the government of Israel to recognize the sovereignty of the state of Palestine.
Yeah.
And the reason we're bringing up in this context is that it's related directly, it seems at this point anyway, to how the US government is looking at Canada as a potential trade partner and the negotiations there. So I don't know that we normally get into geopolitics, but because it has a real direct connection to the trade and tariff conversations that impact our business members, I thought this was something to think about a little bit. Like, how do we see these pieces coming together?
Yeah, no, it's go ahead.
No, sorry, and I was going to say, and to me, it's what I'm interested in is almost this way in which we're now conflating geopolitics and economic conversations in the current world, more so than the Palestine-Israel component of it. Yeah. I'm really fascinated about how these levers are being pulled in different ways.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think there is maybe a reading of it that might suggest that there's maybe a symbolic departure from sort of Canada's, let's say, coupling with the U.S. in a way. I should say so. Prime Minister Carney did say that in September at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly, he intends to recognize the state of Palestine, as you said. This, of course, comes after both France and the UK have said similar things. The UK saying kind of bizarrely that they intend to recognize the state of Palestine unless there is a ceasefire. And Canada's conditions are different in that they intend to recognize the state of Palestine conditional on demilitarization and along with holding general elections in 2026. There hasn't been a general election in either territory, Gaza or the West Bank, since 2006. And in this upcoming election, Hamas cannot be on the ballot. Yeah. He said that he spoke with President Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian Authority, who of course runs through the Fatah party, the West Bank, which is different, of course, than Hamas, which runs Gaza. And so there is that sort of dynamic there. I'll say there is some criticism or some mixed reactions to this. Of course, many are celebrating, saying finally Canada is joining the vast majority of the world. Yeah. I believe 148 other countries that already recognize the state of Palestine. The state of Palestine also already exists under international law. Yeah. So Canada and the U.S. are really the outliers.
We're outliers, yeah. We're unique.
Yeah. And it also many folks are saying this is coming 20 months, almost 2 years of a genocide in Gaza, and now with an acute policy of starvation and a blockade of needed aid. There are stories of doctors saying that there's
including Canadian doctors.
Yes, absolutely, saying that baby formula is being confiscated and all these things. So a humanitarian crisis, which we have not seen. Certainly not in my lifetime. So there is some criticism here, and there's also some criticism that there is no conditionality on the part of Israel to cease some of their their atrocities, let's say, and in particular, some of the illegal settlements in the West Bank, which under international law are illegal. So with that context, I think it's important to provide that. Now, with this move from Prime Minister Carney, President Donald Trump has said that getting a trade deal by our August 1st deadline is going to be difficult. Because, of course, the United States does not recognize the state of Palestine. I think this, and I made a round-the-corner video about this, but I think it speaks to our reliance on the U.S. I understand linguistically, geographically, why this sort of NAFTA-era policy was undertaken. I think it leaves us far too vulnerable to despotic whims. And Jonathan and I also spoke about the opportunity in Europe, right, to embrace European standards and design harmonization, standard harmonization, to beef up our strategic partnership and CETA, and just kind of embrace the fact that we have French Canadians who can maybe we can improve our relationship with France and French-speaking Europe, right? So there's opportunity elsewhere for us, but I guess my read is it's I don't know, it's depressing because, of course, personally, that I want this violence to end. It's heartbreaking, and I hope that we can move on and think about how to restore these people's livelihoods and homes and so on and so forth. But, yeah. What's your take?
Yeah, no, I think in the main, I see it the same way you do. From the humanitarian perspective, anything that moves us closer to ending these atrocities and the stories that we hear, particularly around children, are very, very difficult for me to absorb, and they should be. Yeah, quite frankly, I think that something's wrong if they're not difficult to absorb. Yeah, and running away from them, pretending they don't exist, is not an option. So I'm glad that we may be making strides in that direction, and that there seems to be more vocal commitments to trying to enact change from those countries who are in a position to do so. Yeah. So I everything you're saying, I agree with you. The other piece I think that's interesting here for me that I'm trying to figure out is, what does this symbolize as it pertains to our relationship with the United States? Yeah. Is this a prime minister who, in the context of other trade conversations and negotiations and pressures, quite frankly, from the U.S. Regarding specific elements of our relationship, including supply and demand provisions and so forth, feeling emboldened and prepared to start stepping away from the United States? Is this a reflection of where we are in other elements of our relationship? Is this something that our government will back down on in the face of economic pressure from the United States? I think it's a really interesting, and this is why I made sort of that caveat of, like, this may be a completely irrelevant conversation, not the part you're talking about, not the justice part of it, but what it means may be very different in 24 hours. Because this is not a statement that the Canadian government is making without pressure to retract it. That's right. That's right. And it's worth pointing out that, for better or for worse, whatever their deal is, the deal that the UK has with the US has been settled. Yes. Trade-wise. The deal that the EU has with the US has been settled trade-wise. Canada's is still in negotiation. Yes. And there was a lot of public announcement toward getting that deal struck and in place by tomorrow. Yeah. Which I think no one has said it definitively, but everyone seems to understand it's not going to get in place. And I think there's some acknowledgement by Prime Minister Carney that it may not be in place by tomorrow. Yeah. So I'm curious, in addition to everything we're talking about, I stand by the support for doing something like this. I think Prime Minister Carney has done a reasonable job. I understand the criticisms of this. Yeah. I think what he's trying to do, my read, is trying to find this middle ground where Canada can demonstrate support for those who are vulnerable in Gaza, and stand by a solution toward alleviating this humanitarian crisis, while acknowledging Israel's concerns about Hamas. Yeah. And again, is it enough? My personal opinion is more needs to be done, but I think this is the line he's trying to thread here of trying to do what is right and what global pressure is to stand for, while at the same time not condemning Israel by trying to be solution focused instead of being blame focused. Yeah. Take it into what you will. I understand. I believe that's what he's trying to do here. But what I'm really curious about is, what does this mean if the U.S. government says, yeah, this is like, we can't stand by this, and you got to take this back. If you want trade, and I'm really curious at, like, what is the price that Canada is willing to pay to take this stance? Because I do believe we're going to pay a price for this one. Trump seems to be nothing if not vengeful, and nothing if not petty. And I feel like he's going to be petty and vengeful over this, because this is a slap in the face to him. He clearly seems to be, in his interpretation of this, this is going to make it difficult to get a trade deal done with Canada. So at some point, does the Canadian government step back from this point of view?
Yeah.
I'm fascinated to see where this goes.
This is, and again, when folks are listening to this, the answer will already have been publicized. But this is a defining moment in the prime ministership of Mark Carney.
I very much believe so. He was elected in large part because he presented a case to the Canadian public that he was the right individual to get a trade deal done with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
That was the basic premise on which he was.
And that we can give ourselves more than the U.S. could ever take away.
Precisely.
Well.
Great call out.
Yeah.
That seems very much to be in doubt right now.
Yeah.
And if this results, already he's not going to hit the deadline that he had committed to.
Mm-hmm.
Negotiations take time, and I think people are willing to look at timelines a little more softly than perhaps something that may scuttle the deal.
Yeah.
And this is potentially something that will scuttle the deal. And how Canadians respond to that, I think, and to your point, may be very defining for how long he gets to be prime minister.
Yeah.
At the same time, interestingly enough, I think it's worth pointing out, which is a completely unrelated story, but tickles my funny bone nonetheless, is that there's no guarantee that Pierre Poilievre is going to win his seat in Battle River. It sounds like it's really contentious right
200
now.
names on the ballot. Yeah.
Yeah. So at a time that there is no clear opposition to him, nonetheless, his own prime ministership for Mark Carney, I think, is really going to be tested right now. His hold on that prime ministership is going to be tested.
Totally.
So I'm really fascinated because I actually appreciate the Canadian government doing something that feels like it's the morally right thing.
Yeah.
Again, I think we can go further, but it's the right direction. Yeah. But there's tremendous pressure in a way that pressure isn't there on France and the UK.
No, you're right.
To step back from that because their trade deals are already in place.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. So this is very interesting. It also should be noted, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that there was a bombshell report this week as well from the Palestinian Youth Movement, Arms Embargo Now, and a number of
unbelievable.
And essentially what it revealed is, first of all, comb through that report. There are so many different numbers that are really stand out. But essentially, according to our own government, in January 2024, they publicly stated that they are no longer facilitating arms shipments to Israel. They're not issuing new permits, and they're eliminating or pausing existing permits. This report reveals that between I think October 2023 and July 2025. So essentially,
up until now,
even till now, arms shipments are still moving from Canada to Israel, and that includes arms shipments placed on commercial flights that you and I take. Right. So this is a bombshell report. I think in April 2025 alone, I think 175,000 bullets were shared between
like flights to Germany or something, like through Germany into Israel. I saw that piece.
No. So this is pretty damning because it shows that the Canadian government has lied to Canadians.
And I think this is the part that I think is important to focus on.
Yeah.
So because again, I have my point of view.
Yeah.
But I'm not suggesting I'm neutral here. But without editorializing or taking a side on the conflict itself, the fact is the Canadian government actively and openly lied to the Canadian public about their role in this. Whether you agree with our support for Israel or not, that's important. But in this particular case, the point is that this government thinks we're stupid. And I think this is really, coming back to maybe where we started this a little bit from as well, but storytelling. And maybe we need to be more journalistic. But the lack of journalists in our country. Because two things came about from this. One, in my mind, it wasn't Canadian journalists that unearthed this and brought this to light. This was
society.
That's correct. And then the other part of it is that this story has gone away very, very quickly. And this is, in my mind, this is a huge thing. I don't know if I'm probably dating myself, but the analogous thing I think about here is like Iran-Contra. And how big that was in the 1980s when that came about. And there was other elements to that. I'm not suggesting these are like equal cases. But when a government lies about how it's supporting a foreign war, this is a huge deal. And a government who's actively looking to deceive the public is a huge deal. The fact that this has happened, that it wasn't, and I'm not saying the Canadian journalistic society or community has failed so much as I'm saying this is a failure of having a Canadian journalistic community. We simply don't have the newsrooms and the bench strength to investigate stories like this. And so when we shift into a world that we're relying on social media and quite frankly podcasts to break news, this is the cost. The governments get away with things for a long period of time. And when they get uncovered, it's not even by us. It's by someone else who's been doing the grunt work here.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the story to me, is that the Canadian government lied and Canadian journalists were not, front and center in uncovering this.
Yeah.
What else is going on that the Canadian government lies to us about? And this is not about liberal versus conservative.
No.
The Canadian government, what else do levels of government get away with that no one here is able to report on?
Yeah.
And that's what's really frightening about stuff like that to me. And then throw on top of that, however you may feel about the fact that we're sending bullets to Israel. That's a whole other thing on top of that. But fundamentally, this is a huge issue in my mind.
And just the irony of one of these conditions being that Palestine demilitarized.
Yeah,
that's like asking Pakistan to demilitarize or Taiwan to demilitarize, right? We're sending military equipment to to Israel, and so there is this complexity to the situation. But I think, to your point, wherever you stand on this issue, as a participant and a citizen of this democracy, you should be outraged by the communication from your federal government.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think this type of accountability is not only critical in the principle of it, but increasingly, when we've talked about this in previous podcasts as well, we have a government right now at the federal level, just focus on the federal level right now, who is putting in place legislation that, in the spirit of moving us economically forward, which is what I think we all, every Canadian can get behind. We all want jobs, we all want security, we all want to be able to pay our bills. Is putting forward legislation, however, that really takes away a lot of power. Gives the federal government a lot of power.
Exactly,
that's the way to describe it better.
C5, C4,
precisely. Gives them unprecedented power to make decisions and to bypass the need to consult.
Absolutely.
And so, what are we talking about here right now? We're talking about a government that is already operating, and now we have a proof point to say is willing to deceive the Canadian public, to do whatever it is that they feel is the appropriate thing to do, and now is putting forward legislation where their requirement to be upfront and honest with us has even lowered further. So what does that mean? And then if you want to put in the context of this specific situation, we also have a government that's made a greater commitment to military spending. Both in terms of maintaining our relationship with NATO, but also, again, in the context of spurring our economy. Creating armored trucks and vehicles and things of that nature is job creation. It puts the Canadian steel industry right now, which is under tremendous pressure from the U.S. tariffs, to work doing domestic work. But what happens when we're creating weapons of war and the tools of war? If we acknowledge this is one of the ways we're going to spur our economy, and we have a government that we're not convinced is operating in an open manner about how they're utilizing and deploying those weapons that we're creating, I mean, we have another potential moral crisis coming as well. So the more we go down this road, the more it's important that we find ways to create transparency and accountability.
No, completely.
So I think this is a much bigger story than it's being perceived as.
No, absolutely. It's existential. To wrap up, because there's a lot there. Maybe we should go back to the local.
Sure, let's bring it home, and where we started this a little bit about, right? We talked a little bit about the commitment to doing the podcast and the why. And you're right. We wanted to park this, and I think you brought it up, so I'm going to let you you sort of have the first stab at answering this. You wanted to talk a little bit about, as sort of at this sort of milestone moment in our podcast, what motivates us to do this? Like, why are we trying to find more ways to talk about Brampton? Why do we care about this community? What drives you to put in this work?
So for me, I was born and raised in this community in Brampton, and I think, like many others, I sort of went through school and had my friends and all of that, and I got embedded into the community in a few different ways. Rotaract was part of that, which is the sort of under 30 version of Rotary. No longer under 30, but I enjoyed the ribbon rolls and all of that. I also around 2016, I won't say where, but I was working at a job that felt a little bit uninspiring, and I had reached out to the Bramptonists, which is still around, And I had pitched this article, which was detailing the top 10 artists from Brampton. That was the first article I wrote for them. And after writing that article, because at that time, 2016, there were a lot of Toronto-based musicians that were experiencing a lot of success in the mainstream, and many of those from Toronto are actually from Brampton.
Yeah.
Alessia Cara and Roy Woods, Tory Lanez, and so on.
Toronto is a very sort of catch-all term.
Yeah.
I'm originally from Scarborough.
Yeah.
You know, so again, depends how you want to describe it.
Yeah.
Politically, I understand people can define us as being Toronto.
Yeah.
These are unique communities, Brampton,
Yeah,
Scarborough, others, where
Totally.
Toronto kind of claims
Exactly.
all the suburbs, and
Yes.
we're one of them for sure. Sorry, I didn't cut you off.
No,
but
no,
yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that I think in in terms of relative to the written word, it went viral.
Yeah.
And I got messages of a bunch of artists who were interested in doing an interview and talking about their art. And I learned a ton of artists at the time, Havaya Mighty, and we know Noise, and they did the Cypher in front of Sonny's, and Darren Falana, who's a fantastic rapper, and Stasia Daniels, Everything O'Shawn, Exco Levi. I ended up interviewing all of these people and maintaining these relationships, and I saw Brampton in a different light through the lens of arts and culture, and I saw how talented it was, how creative it was, how diverse, and I kind of thought of Brampton as maybe the sleeper suburb. It's a transitional place. Yeah. I realized it was a breeding ground for tremendous talent. For Y'all Entertainment, we talked to them as well. Yeah. They were on. There's this program, Sway in the Morning, Sway's Universe Hip Hop Institution. They did an interview with Sway. And I remember Sway saying, "Man, what's in the water in Brampton?"
Yeah.
And that just kind of stuck with me, and that became sort of this motivating force. So even though I lived elsewhere, I came back to this community, and I felt like there's so much potential in terms of we can make the built form of this community reflect the people who live here.
Yeah.
And I was I'm even in this job, I am motivated by this aspiration, and that's why. I'm so grateful that I can advocate on things like public transit and affordable housing and immigration and workforce development and all these things, because I think all of these things can be a reflection of the soul of the city, which I think is very impressive. I don't know. Yeah.
I like that. That's a good reason. I can't top that reason. We should just end right now. That's a better reason than my reason. So for me, I guess what it is, it's similar in that it's about that notion of potential.
Yeah.
And so unlike you, as I alluded to, I was not born in Brampton. The term I use, I'm Brampton by choice.
Yeah.
So I was raised in Scarborough and went to school in Hamilton.
Yeah.
And then when Angel and I got married and we were living in Toronto. And we, I think with many people, I have the very stereotypical story for a lot of people who come to Brampton is we were looking for a place at that time we could afford.
Yeah.
And my in-laws lived in Mississauga. Yeah. And so like a lot of people, you when you're going to start a family, you move closer to where childcare is going to be in support. That's right. And my in-laws are amazing and they were retired. And so we moved out to this side of the city, this side of the GTA. And we bought our first place in Brampton. We had never been here. I have one aunt who lives in Brampton. I knew basically how to get to her house and back, and that was all I'd ever seen in Brampton. I think I went to Shoppers World once with my cousin once to get something, and so I knew nothing of Brampton. We drove directly to a developer's place. We saw a townhouse on a sheet that looked like we could afford it, and it seemed like it met our needs. Basically at 410 in Beauvert. And backed onto the golf course. That sounded cool at that time.
Yeah.
That golf course did not exist at that time, but the idea that we'd back onto a golf course sounded sexy. Yeah. And so we bought a little townhouse here in Brampton. And this community blew me away. Yeah. So within a year of us getting that house, we had no exposure to Brampton. And in that year, discovered what this community was. We found Hart Lake. Yeah. We found Professor's Lake. Yeah. We found the downtown of Brampton. We found Gage Park. We found the farmers market. And within a year, we had sold that first house that we had. So, which, by the way, terrible financial decision. Never sell a house within a year of buying it. You're basically throwing money away. But we bought a house in the downtown of Brampton. Yeah. And then spent the next basically 15, 16 years living in downtown Brampton. Yeah. A few different houses. We moved to a few different neighborhoods. Yeah. But we just loved the vibrancy of the community. Yeah. And understanding how much was going on here and really seeing that this was a city separate from Toronto and had its own identity.
Yeah.
I grew up, again, in Scarborough. Scarborough at that time really felt like it was part of Toronto. It had gone through the amalgamation.
Yeah.
It had its own character in many ways, but it didn't have a downtown. It didn't have a center. Angel grew up in Mississauga. There's not a center to Mississauga. They're creating something around Square One, and good for them, but it didn't have that same feel. Brampton felt like it was its own unique city, with its own unique vibe, with a downtown that was on the come up, and we really fell in love with the idea of being here. And in as much as you describe, this is your home because you grew up here, I think for me, wherever you raise your kids kind of becomes a home in a different way as well.
Yeah.
So I have a real emotional investment in this city because this is where my children were raised. And this is what you're describing for you is what I see them going through. This is their schools, this is their sports teams and all so forth. But when it comes to the work here, I think a big part of it was, for me, I got really lucky early on, and this is going back almost 20 years. I ran in a federal election as a campaign, as a candidate for the Green Party. And it was one of the most important experiences of my life because it exposed me to, like, almost everything else that's happened, including me being in this job. I can trace directly back to the decision to put my name on that ballot. Because that's where you learn about your community. That's where you start knocking on doors and having to defend your point of view to strangers.
Oh, man.
And I was a Green Party candidate, so no one's like mad at you. Like, if you're ever going to start in politics, start as a Green, because if anything, they think you're delusional, but no one's mad at you, right? They think you're cute. It's cute. You like trees. But it was a great opportunity to meet other like-minded people who volunteered on my campaign.
Absolutely.
And who share, and many of whom I'm still in contact with, who I share ideals with. And this idea for a bigger and better Brampton. And it's a much longer story, but that's what led me to getting involved with the Board of Trade as a member, because I joined that Policy and Government Relations Committee that you now chair. I joined 20 years ago because, hey, we need a perspective of someone who's a bit of a tree hugger on this community, on this committee. And that led to many opportunities for me to sit on various boards and perspectives and do lots of really interesting things as community. But what that means, to answer your question directly, it's a long way of me saying what I saw through all those exposures, chairing the library board, being here as part of the Board of Trade, being the chair of the Board of Trade, seeing how decisions got made around things like LRTs, funding, city budgets, and so forth. I really saw up close how decisions get made in a community. And this is not a criticism of Brampton. I think this is any community you're in, and that's why I started off with saying why I'm emotionally invested here. I think if you care about any community that you're in and get involved, you will see what I saw. And that is, the way decisions get made don't always represent the needs of the community as a whole. They represent the needs, they represent the influence and abilities of the people who run the city, a select few. Sometimes that's within a specific political class. Sometimes that's within a specific economic class. Sometimes within a particular neighborhood. But what I saw, the more I got involved in Brampton as a community, the more I saw this disconnect between the people who were doing the work and those who had the need, coming back to conversations like the one we had with Regen, and how resources were being allocated and who was benefiting. And again, this is not a criticism of Brampton. I believe every community has this. There's always going to be this disconnect.
Absolutely.
So the opportunity then, therefore, if you care about the community you live in, is to work on that. How do we create that equity? What does the vision of that community look like when it's operating well? What is the opportunity? What does the vision of that community look like when we actually reach our full potential, God forbid, and actually be what's here? And this community, I believe, fundamentally, has more potential than any other community in this country because of the influx of new ideas and new people and the fact that we're so young, all the stuff we love to brag about, that we're so young, that we're so diverse, that we're so international, but we don't leverage it. But it's here. I see all the pieces. I see a community with that where I feel like the decision making, again, it's not a criticism. It's just what it is. It's not equal. And if we, through an organization like this, can raise more awareness of how decisions are made, if we can occasionally put our thumb on the scale for something that we feel is right, and influence a decision to be made that maybe gives voice to people who wouldn't otherwise have voice, if we are able to create programs or resources or just noise that allows good light to be shone on the people who are doing good work and gives them the opportunity to extend what they're doing, then this is work worth doing.
No, for sure.
And so I know I'm kind of rambling here, but I fell in love with the community. I raised my kids in this community, so I'm invested in this community. I got to see how the sausage gets made. In general, and now I just want to make sure that we make the best out of all that stuff.
Yeah.
I've been so privileged to be put in so many positions of responsibility and authority in this community that I feel it would be a huge waste of the last 20 years of opportunities people have given me to show leadership in this community if I didn't now use all that I know and all the people that trust me to try to do good in this community. And I just can't see myself leaving Brampton or doing anything else that didn't have this level of commitment to this community.
Yeah. That's incredible. No, genuinely. Like
I like your reason better still.
No. I think that's a good place to wrap. A couple of reactions there. I think number one, we absolutely have to do a podcast where it's the Jaipaul interview, and because I want to hear all about the federal campaign and all of that. I think that's fascinating. But the second thing is, I think sometimes when I look to my colleagues, my friends, and maybe this is a product of like capitalist realism or something, but there's sort of this consumptive relationship that people have with cities. Yeah. I want to move to New York because I want the cafes and the pizza and the yellow cabs.
Yeah.
And, I want to idealize that life, and Toronto for similar reasons and whatnot. But something shifted in my head, and I think you can relate to this. Even if a city is frustrating, if you feel like you have some ownership over it, you are invested.
Yeah.
Even if it's not ideal.
Yeah.
Like you can't just, if your kid is not, behaving, you're not going to be like, I wish I had a different kid.
Yeah.
I can't help but feel like I need to be contributing to the city in some way, because when I look around at the buildings and the streets, I feel a sense of ownership of it. It's not just me, it's everybody, but that's just, I can't help but feel that way. And so I can't abandon it. Right.
Yeah.
And I see that in what you've
I
described.
feel a true sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
I feel like this job is a real privilege.
Yeah.
I know I can do better. I know organization we can do better. I'm not saying we're great at it. I need to do better. But the sense of responsibility I feel in this role is at times almost as overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, and I don't want to be delusional, like I'm changing the future of Brampton, but we all are through our small contribution.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we can play a role in getting more people involved in understanding how things work and therefore how they can get involved, then I think we have the potential to not make the change ourselves, but facilitate that change. Yeah. Yeah. And the more people we get involved in that conversation, and the more educated those people are, the better those decisions are going to be.
Absolutely.
So again, I'm not delusional enough to think that you and I are going, I'm not going to change the future of this community, but the work we do with our colleagues here and our board and our members has the potential, I think, over time to be transformative. And I believe like that, the arc of history,
bends towards justice.
It does.
Yeah.
But you have to do the work. You have to do the work.
Yes,
right? It's not going to happen overnight, but I think it'd be a lovely legacy if we can look back when we're done, whatever it is that you and I are doing here, and say, some stuff happened in this community, and we played a small role in that. I think that'd be really, really satisfying to me.
I think so too. Yeah.
So that's where we're at. So
I don't know how long that was, but
we went long. But it was mostly my fault.
No. I don't know. We went to like a vortex for a moment there, I think.
But I think this is good, and I think you're, I think I'm really glad that you wanted to have that part of the conversation, because to me it just reinforces where we started this discussion, that we started this podcast because we saw an opportunity to tell better stories and to tell more stories and to create more education. Yeah. And thanks to you, and thanks to Josh, and thanks to everyone who supported us doing this, we've gotten 12 of these done. We passed our test case, and we're committed. None of what you and I talked about, what motivates us, has diminished. No. It feels like this is helping in that mission for both you and I personally and individually, and the organization. Yeah. And so I'm really happy that I can say, I think, we've passed the beta stage. Yeah. This is a thing now.
This is a thing. Yeah.
We're never going to be Board of Trade. And we're just going to find ways to make this bigger and more interesting, and hopefully more impactful as we do this. So thank you to everyone, and in particular yourself and Josh, for getting us here, everyone who's listened. But we've officially passed the prototype. We are officially a podcast now. And I'm looking forward to doing many, many more of these as in the months and years to come.
It's funny because when I was hired last year, you mentioned, "Oh, we got to do the podcast." I thought you were joking, so I'm glad we're here.
It's probably best to assume most of what I'm saying is just me babbling. But every now and then we do something crazy, and it works.
There you go.
So this is great, and I appreciate, by the way, you humoring me and trying this out alongside it.
Of course.
And then finally, thanks to anyone who's been listening, all of you who've been listening. We appreciate your ongoing support. Thank you to the Brampton Honey Badgers one more time for supporting us thus far. And we look forward to having more sponsors join us as we start to expand the podcast and its scope. And if you want to learn more about the Brampton Board of Trade and how we can be supporting you or get involved in some of our community advocacy efforts, reach out to myself or Vijay, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks.